Please remember that when things get rough, you could always leave over there and come here to Sankofa Books and sit down and relax. Because this is the liberation space and the liberation zone.
All right, let's see if we can get this going. This is not for y'all, obviously. This is for everybody who's not here. Virtual class. We're going to do these slides once. Then we're going to get into framing question 4. But I want everybody on the same page so that when you see this again, well, you all need to see it again. This is for all people who are not here. So, first thing we did in African studies, our faculty came up with a plan. And so everybody is getting their thing together. So it's probably going to be Zoom, but I don't want to say for sure because I want to make sure that our Center for Teaching and Excellence in Learning has all the bandwidth and capacity necessary. We all got licenses, but I want to make sure it works. All right, so very quickly, and then we'll go to what we need to do in framing question 4, virtual class, which is where we're going after today. The off-site plan, here it is. Off-site plan. Let's see here. All right, first element of the off-site plan is the digital platform will be the Zoom or Tegrity. Tegrity is the one that is linked to Blackboard. So over the break, so-called break, I'll be experimenting with both. I was playing around with Zoom yesterday. So instructions will be forthcoming. Check your emails. I sent one out yesterday on Blackboard. Did y'all get it? You got it, right? If you didn't, check, make sure your email on Blackboard is the one that's lined up. Almost sound like freshman seminar I used to do, right? And uploaded lectures, there'll be uploaded pieces. I'm gonna put this video up, but also for office hours. And I know that people are traveling, they'll be in different time zones. So come up with a couple of times that I'll just be on there. But might even try to do a live lecture, depends. But the ones that we do, I will upload them that are connected. Let's go to the embodied format. That's going to change, obviously. We're going to answer specific questions based on the reading, so the books, of course. We'll talk about that again in a minute from the syllabus. Lecture essays / draft text. I'll pull that language up again from the syllabus. This is the element that every semester I try to create a little bit more of the draft text for an Africana Studies textbook, since we really don't have one in the field, not one that's disciplinary, but more on that in a moment. And then the uploaded lectures. So instead of the in-class embodies, which of course we won't be doing physically anymore, I'll be sending out specific questions for you to upload. Same way you upload about the essays. So we'll do that instead of the in-class embodies. About the essays, to do as usual, still uploading them. So framing question 4, which we're talking about this week, and would have been talking about the week after spring break. That one's still due Friday, April the 3rd, 2020, because you'll still have new material, not next week, but the week after. So actually, fingers crossed, that stuff will be uploaded by Monday of the week after next. So you'll have actually a little bit more time. Of course, you get to look at it whenever you want now, instead of 8 to 9:30, 8:10 to 9:30 on Tuesdays and Thursday mornings. So, but the 4th frame question will still be due Friday, April 3rd, 11:59 p.m. And the 5th, and then by then we'll be in week 1 of the 5th framing question, which means we'll do another week of that, and then the 5th framing question will be due Friday, April 18th, 2020. With any luck, we'll all be back here. So the only one this will affect in terms of being in class physically will be this embodied. We'll see. I think they said it's projected out till what? The 5th, the 6th? Right. And so, but we all know that we don't know where we'll be by the 6th of April. So my colleagues at Penn, they said they're gone for the semester, right? What was wrong with you? The girls tried to hold out till the very end. He was like, okay, we canceled. They canceled last night. Some people are talking about they're not coming back, but you know, we'll see where we are. Hopefully, we'll all be back together before then. Oh, and graduating seniors, I haven't forgotten about you. Especially, I know y'all got some of my folks over in Allied Health have specific boards and stuff. I don't know how they're gonna handle that. with y'all. But at any rate, senior exams, obviously, all those things are up in the air, not graduation, but everybody's gonna, we're gonna do what we're gonna do. We're gonna do to get y'all out. But how many graduating seniors I got here? Any graduating seniors? So this is mostly folks here and that. But at either rate, the final exam I think is scheduled for the 30th on the syllabus, but we'll figure it out. Hopefully, we'll all be back together before the 18th. Check emails, bless you. Updates, class lectures, essays, draft text, that stuff will be loaded. What I'm going to do, yes ma'am?
April 18th is a Saturday.
Is it? I'm sorry, thank you for catching that. That should be the 17th then. In fact, I'll fix that right now. Somebody gonna be looking at that who's not here. My bad math at 5 a.m. Let's try that again. The 17th is Friday.
Yeah.
Appreciate you. Let's do that again then. All right. And that'll do it. All right, yes, thank you. 17th then, Friday, April 17th. Yeah, for basic math. That's math, right, son? All right. So check emails for updates. This last one, the class lecture essays or draft text, or instead of us being here next week, I'll be going through and adding some material to the framing questions that we've done already. And by that, I mean things I've already written, and I'll post all of that. But for framing question 4, which is due on the 3rd, you'll have an essay, small essay, that will supplement the regular class readings for you to draw from, but it'll be kind of like an alloy. Part of it will be whatever videos I upload for the framing question, but also it will be this draft essay, which is part of that kind of text that I was talking about earlier in the semester. But to clarify, I'm gonna pull from the syllabus right quick. The key passages from the syllabus that connect to what we're talking about. Because in some ways, even though I think the most important element of us being together, of course, is being together physically. There's some things you just can't do virtually. You have to be together for that. Yes? Yeah, the numbers, thank you, very good question. The question was about the embodies and uploading them and whether or not the number is still 20. Yes, the number is still 20. So nothing changes in terms of the grade format, the assessment format. Still be worth 20% of your grade, still be worth 20 embodies. In fact, I may try to figure out how to, since we won't be having physical class sessions, may try to figure out how to give you a few more embodied opportunities so that for folks who might have been concerned about not reaching the 20, I mean, since we're virtual now, that kind of loosens us up to do some other things. So I'm gonna make a note of that. Thank you, very good. So very quickly, the key passages, this is I think from page 2 or 3 of the syllabus. So I just cut and paste them so y'all can see for yourselves. This is in the syllabus. No introduction to African Studies textbook has yet been written to sustain a disciplinary focus as it relates to the African historical experience or African historical experiences. Most African American history textbooks follow, and this is an African American history course as we know, it's African Studies, very different. But most of these textbooks that deal with so-called African American history follow the same normative and genealogical structure prompted by the narrative form of Western history textbooks. We talked about that in class. A brief rehearsal of pro-slavery Africa, pre-slavery rather, not pro, pre-slavery Africa. A long focus on slavery as a part of the development of the Americas, so forth and so on. But that's not really why I put this particular passage up. I put this passage up as a reminder, particularly to the folks who are not here today and who are already self-quarantined or just plain lazy. These are the books again. So folks are like, well, what books are we supposed to have? Well, of course we know, but just in case they didn't know, they're all there. They're all there, with the exception of the passage, Daniel Black's book, The Passage, which I somehow left out of that enumeration. But we're past the passage in terms of our framing questions. So if you don't have it already, which I assume most people do, it's okay for where we're going now, because these are the books that you will need to complete framing questions 4, 5, and 6. And then finally, in terms of that, this is page 6 of the syllabus. As Howard's Department of African American Studies continues to review and restructure its curriculum to link courses to the highest national and international standards in the field and discipline of African Studies, a major objective of this semester's work is to generate draft elements of Introduction to African Studies materials that can be used in multiple introductory level courses. Each of you will serve as editorial assistants by providing regular feedback on both written pages of draft text and in-class commentary related to the project. Of course, this has been suspended, and so the embongis that you will complete now, part of the specific questions will ask you to respond to the draft text that everyone will have. We're going to make it as painless as possible, so you'll have to read those pages and respond to them. That'll be part of the embongi work. That will allow us to continue to keep what we're having in terms of a conversation current. And then during those Zoom office hours, then folks want to log in for, I'll probably do it for a couple of hours at a time window. You can just log in, and I'll send you all any instructions you need on how to do that. My law students apparently have been using Zoom before this for some classes, but is anyone in here familiar with Zoom? You use it? Okay, so you can use it. It's kind of efficient, huh? Very good, very good. Thank you. So we zooming, zoom. Okay. Any questions about this before we go on? Good. All right. Then let us move quickly to our fourth framing question. We're going to kind of go through this fairly briskly. Our fourth framing question of our 6 framing questions. How did Africans begin to conceptualize unity in thought and action beyond national boundaries in the face of European and American imperialism? Time-space coordinates are taking us from the mid-1800s to the mid-19th century, right around the time of the U.S. Civil War, through the early 1900s. We talked about on Tuesday. This period is when the United States begins to expand its territorial aspirations beyond the North American continent. It's also the time when Africans become more aware of each other because of improving technology, travel technology, communications technology. And our coordinates, go to the bag, our coordinates in terms of the time and space are there. Now let me move very quickly to excavate our texts. Primarily, said Robinson, Black Movements in America, chapters 4 and 5. The Atlas, our Atlas of African American History and Politics, units 4 and 7, and Wole Soyinka's book of Africa, part 1, in addition to the text. And what you'll see with the draft text, we're going to tie things together in a way I think that'll make a lot more sense. All right, we'll skip over Whoa. I wanted to go over that, but that's all right. My favorites, but we'll talk about that. Actually, this was a song that this brother over here, Babatunde Olatunji, actually created. Here's Abby Lincoln with Babatunde Olatunji, who was from Nigeria, Yoruba man, recorded an album in 1960, Drums of Passion. People credit him with starting quote-unquote world music, which of course is absurd. People have been playing music in the world long for him. But this sister right here, Abiola Moseka, or in her European name, Abby Lincoln, was on this performance they have there. That's actually from We Insist, the Freedom Now suite, but it was to make the point that how Africans began to conceptualize unity in thought and action beyond national boundaries. You got an African from the continent, an African from North America, collaborating together, and in part, as we talked about with Chano Pozo and Dizzy Gillespie on Tuesday, a lot of it is culture. A lot of the music is culture. A lot of the connection is culture. Framing narrative. We talked about the relationship between Cuba and the United States a little bit. In terms of our first conceptual category, social structure, who are Africans to other people, we see Calvin Coolidge and his lovely wife, and we're here as part of a couple of couples who go to Cuba. He was the last U.S. president to travel there before this sister and brother, who were there with Raul Castro, the Obamas, of course, who caught hell for going down there 90 miles off the coast of Florida, because they considered these Cubans to be pariahs, even as I said on Tuesday, that the blood of Cuba, Africa runs through the citizens of Cuba, as was said by his brother, Raul's brother, Fidel, shown here with Malcolm X at the Hotel Teresa when Fidel Castro came to the United Nations and did not stay at the place where dignitaries usually stayed, went uptown and stayed with the black folks. This created problems for the United States. Because in the social structure, Africans and others are tied to the countries they're in, not to each other. But we know, of course, the second conceptual category, which is what? The second conceptual category. Governance, right? The governance structure question is, who are Africans to each other? And in this case, Fidel Castro's allegiances were often people of African descent because it was he who said that the blood of Africa runs through the Cuban race, which is interesting. Cuban people, rather. Here, of course, he is with another of his friends, Nelson Mandela, or Madiba, who traveled from South Africa on a thank you tour around the world, thanking the people who had helped them in the struggle. Fidel Castro had sent an army into Southern Africa to fight against the white minority regime in South Africa, the South African military, and helped put pressure on the South Africans that led ultimately to the collapse of that regime. Even as the United States was fighting on the other side, trying to help their white brothers and sisters. We have conflicting missions. This brother is at George Washington University, Havana, Washington in Africa, 59 to 75. Here's Fidel Castro with other Southern African leaders. Here, of course, is Castro here, but here's his opponent. In the social structure, they would say that black people in the United States and others should side with him. Why? Because we apparently speak the same language. But we do not, of course, because many African people in the anti-apartheid movement were siding with him because he was actually helping the Southern Africans. So y'all can read about this stuff for yourselves. Going back a generation or so, even more, confronting black Jacobins. This is Gerald Horne's book, which talks about these international relationships. Here is this African, Haitian, who was providing a little justice to this man who wanted to keep him enslaved. I guess the sword not going to help you, bro, and choke him. A little bit more effective than coronavirus. But at any rate, the United States, the Haitian Revolution, and the origins of the Dominican Republic, this cover of this book symbolizes what is in this book, which is namely the idea that as the United States fought against the Haitians, they did not want the Haitian Revolution to happen. The Haitians are not only fighting for themselves, they go across the imaginary border into what becomes the Dominican Republic and help liberate what we now know as the Dominicans, and that revolution in Haiti sparked the imagination of Africans all over the hemisphere. Again, framing question 4, how did Africans conceptualize unity and thought beyond national boundaries? Haiti becoming the first republic of people who were formerly enslaved to fight their way into freedom, into liberation. One of the reasons they continue to suffer in Haiti is because the Western countries decided they would always continue to try to punish Haiti for what Haiti did. Let's continue. And of course, the place where we ended on Tuesday, I talked a little bit about, played that music, Manteca, from John Burks Gillespie from South Carolina. There's his partner James Moody on saxophone, and the great Luciano Pozo on percussion, and talked about how they composed Manteca, even though he spoke very little English, he spoke very little Spanish, because they connected through the music. So from the syllabus, by the mid-19th century, there's the 1850s, 1860s, Europeans and those of their former colonies controlled by whites, like the United States, Brazil, other places, these are settler colonies now, began to systematically dispossess Africans of natural resources. So now, by the mid-19th century, Europe is going into Africa to try to dispossess it of natural resources. What's the first thing they pulled out of Africa? This is Wole Soyinka in chapter 1 of Africa. What's the first thing that Europe pulled out of Africa? The evidence of it is sitting in this room. People, right? Pulled us, right? Out of Africa. That's what Soyinka says. When he talks about that, he says Africa became a human hatchery for labor. He pulled labor out of Africa, and as John Henry Clark used to say, my old teacher John Henry Clark used to say, people want out of Africa everything, and they don't want to pay for it. So they go in to get the people, and then, centuries later, come back to occupy the land itself. And, those of you, many of you in here who either directly from the continent or parents are from the continent, who have friends and family from the continent, which would include everybody, I guess, in those three categories, between those categories, know that it isn't just Europe. As we know from the map book, there was a trade in enslaved Africans that was started by Arabs. They call it the Muslim slave trade, but everybody who is Muslims, not part of the Arabic world. So they had that. Then the Europeans came in. The enslavement started by Europeans. And now you see a colonization following Europe's colonization. You have China all over Africa. We have a lot of close conversations. Natural resources. They want those natural resources out of Africa. So the dispossession I'm talking about here, systematically, it isn't just haphazard or accidental, began to systematically dispossess Africans of natural resources, African colonialism. And what about in the former settler colonies, like the United States, which was once a collection of colonies from England, from Holland, the Dutch, from the French, from the Spanish. Now there's the United States. They've broken away from their colonial origin. But in those places, Europeans and those of their former colonies controlled by whites began to reconfigure African labor from chattel slavery, so they're going to end enslavement. Look in the map book, for example. Look in here. Let's go to map 73. What's map 73? Let me get my glasses. Somebody shout it out when you get it. You see it? Who's got it?
Map 73 is the end of slavery in the Western Hemisphere.
All right, I appreciate you. No question. The end of slavery in the Western Hemisphere. That's exactly right. When was the 13th Amendment passed in the United States? You see it there? Very beginning of that language. May 10th, exactly. May 10th, 1865, with the passage of the 13th Amendment, slavery officially ended everywhere in the United States except the Indian territories. They're going to put this on the Cherokee. My God. All right, that's all right. At the end of that language, the end of that narrative, second column at the very end, when did Brazil formally abolish the institution? 1888. People ask you when slavery ended, you say it depends. Formal slavery is one question, 1888 in the Western Hemisphere. Informally, in terms of debt peonage, what we talked about in class the other day, sharecropping, that thing continued. Some people would say it still continues. Debt is a way to trap people. I hope nobody in here is trapped by debt. They call it student loans. I used to around here vote for Bernie Sanders. Most of them are under 40 years old. Why the old people, they ain't got student debt. So they think Joe Biden, if they can wrap that mummy up one more time and shove it out there, might actually win. But the young people like, I owe so much money, this man talking about giving us tax money to cancel debt, I'm voting for Sanders. And we'll see how that works. One more time, by the mid-19th century, Europeans and those of their former colonies controlled by whites, like the United States, Brazil, et al., and other places, in other words, began to systematically dispossess Africans of natural resources, that's colonialism, and reconfigure African labor from chattel slavery to debt peonage, Western Hemisphere. In other words, they're going to tie people to labor through what they owe. If we go all the way back to when we talk about enslavement, you come out of slavery, if you don't own any land, you literally don't have a place to stand. So then they tie people to the land by saying, we'll let you stay here, but you got to work for us, and then we'll get you in debt. And that's what they call debt peonage. Now you're a debt peon. Now you're trapped somewhere by debt you owe. Except now we've moved to what we were talking about earlier, level 7, the modern world system. Improved international communications networks, or what some scholars have called the practice of diaspora. This is a phrase I actually borrowed from somebody who borrowed from somewhere else, Brent Hayes Edwards, wrote a whole book about this practice of diaspora. I'm just expanding the concept a little bit. Enabled Africans to begin to see themselves as part of an oppositional African world. They're going to resist. So the question, frame the question 4, how did Africans begin to conceptualize unity in thought and action beyond national boundaries in the face of European and American imperialism? They begin to become aware of each other through these communication networks, newspapers, telegraph, eventually radio, newsreels, eventually television. They become aware of each other and they realize, oh, you've been resistant. Yeah, you've been resistant. Oh, you've been resistant. Africans who are fighting in the armies of these European nation states, for example. Africans who are fighting, for example, in the so-called Spanish-American War, the Cuban Spanish-American War, the Cuban-Spanish War that America bogarted its way into. America sends black troops among the troops they send to Cuba to fight against the Spanish. And when the black troops get down there, what do they realize about the Cubans? What do their eyes tell them about Cubans? Yeah, they're like, yeah, we black too. But where you get your hair cut? Well, first of all, what's the first thing they're going to have to do before they ever can answer the question of each other? You gotta learn their language, because these Cubans speak Spanish. They speak in English. So they began to communicate with one another, and you see that the Cuban war against the Spanish has a profound effect on the black American troops that go down there. If you go down to the Museum of American History and Culture, my friend Kowalski Salters, who is a military historian, has a PhD in history, curated an exhibit on World War I. And if you go in there, any of y'all been down there to the exhibits, you know what I'm talking about. Yes. Incredible exhibit there on the first floor. When you go in the museum, go down the escalator, look to your left in their temporary exhibit site. It's going to be up there for a few months. Excellent exhibit. So what you see is these black troops then in World War I. They go overseas. They get to France. They're being treated like dirt by the white Americans. But who do they run into? They run into the Africans from the Caribbean who have been drafted into these armies. They run into the Africans from West Africa, some of whom speak French, Cote d'Ivoire, Senegal in particular. And they're like, hey, y'all, we all black together. Yeah, okay, well, I'm gonna remember this when I go home. And many of those Africans go back and become the leaders in their liberation struggles. Either liberation struggles in Africa or the liberation struggles in the United States that we know as the Civil Rights Movement. But it becomes that they're becoming aware of each other in unity and thought, and they get unity and thought and action in the face of this European fight with each other. Right? And then a name we mentioned on Tuesday that we'll come back to shortly, Marcus Garvey, the Jamaican, who travels from Jamaica. He and Amy Ashwood Garvey, then Amy Jacques Garvey, his first and second wives. And there's a scandal in that. We'll talk about it another time, maybe on Zoom. You can ask about the two Amy's. Maybe I'll write about that in the things. Y'all can look it up. But at any rate, all these Jamaicans, they follow the other Jamaicans, the other Trinis, the other folks from Barbados, and the entire Caribbean, to New York City and to the United States. And then they become aware of each other. And the Garveys, Amy Jacques, Amy Ashwood, Marcus, start the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League of the World. They started in Jamaica, but it takes off in the diaspora. And the most chapters of the UNIA, in fact, if we look at our map book, there is a UNIA map in here. Mark that as, and that's in Unit 7. The Cuban-Spanish-American War I was talking about, that's map 90, smoke Yankees. That's what the Cubans call the black Americans. They were like, we call everybody from the United States Yankees, except you look like us, so we'll call y'all smoke Yankees. It's hilarious. A whole book of letters that black people wrote about that stuff. Let me go over to, map 97, Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Marcus and Amy Garvey, we should say more appropriately. If you look on map 97, page 116, you'll see in the United States, you've got hundreds of branches. The states with more than 20 branches include Arkansas got 39. Louisiana got 64. That's where Queen Mother Moore came from. My friend Queen Mother Audley Moore from New Iberia, Louisiana. Queen Mother Moore used to tell the story. She would come to Columbus, Ohio for her birthday. We would all have a big birthday party for her. Audley Moore was a member of the Communist Party. She's a remarkable person, but she was one of the earliest 20th century proponents of reparations. She became, we call her Queen Mother because she was like Queen Mother of reparations. And Queen Mother Moore would tell a story about, they went to see Garvey speak one time in Louisiana, and the police came outside and said, y'all gonna stop this meeting. So they were ready to bust up the meeting. And when they got ready to rush the door, she said, we all came out of our pockets and pocketbooks and everything else with our guns. She said, I had me a little gun in my pocketbook. So we all pulled our guns out and stood on the chairs and was like, speak, Garvey, speak. And Garvey finished the speech because we was not gonna let the police come in. True story. But the Garvey movement, my point is, Garvey was from Jamaica, but the Garvey movements, most of the chapters were in the United States, and most of the chapters in the United States were in the South. We're talking about the 1930s. I'm sorry, no. By then, Garvey had been deported. We're talking about the 1920s.
See Garvey?
Garvey, G-A-R-V-E-Y, Marcus Garvey, yes. And when you look at the global map, You got chapters in Australia, South Africa, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, Brazil, Panama, Colombia, Ecuador, Venezuela, England, chapters all over the world. This was a global organization. How did Africans begin to conceptualize unity in thought and action? This is the 1920s. By the 20s is where they went at peak. So this practice of diaspora enabled Africans to begin to see themselves as part of an oppositional African world, opposing white supremacy, opposing imperialism, eventually for some of them opposing capitalism, even as they struggled against local social, economic, political, and cultural racial oppressions in their respective sites of resistance. So they're fighting a similar fight, even as they're fighting in their specific places against these challenges. All right, let's continue. The semester today, by way of review, framing question 1, how do we undertake the study of the Africana experience or Africana experiences? Our Africana Studies methodology is to answer that question. As we know, we're using assumptions from the academic field and discipline of Africana Studies to create conceptual categories and framing questions to guide our research inquiry. We know this isn't a history class or a philosophy class or a literature class. Anybody who says they're doing Africana Studies in those disciplines is welcome to say they're doing it, but they're really not doing it. Africana Studies is a disciplinary exercise, and that's what we are testing out in this way of approaching the question. We got to come up with different concepts, different methodology, different research inquiry questions. Framing question 2. And remember, we came up with these framing questions because as we were thinking about time and space, you got to have questions that lead us through time and space. That's separate from the conceptual categories. We ask those 6 questions from the conceptual categories in each framing question, except the first one, which is the question, how do we create the framework? Then we apply the framework to each of the next framing questions. Framing question 2, how do Africans preserve and affirm their ways of life and use their culture as a means to resist enslavement? Our time-space coordinates, now we've entered time and space. As we talked about, realizing that time and space coordinates are arbitrary. The only thing that ties time and space together is human memory. Individual memory, social memory, and social memory is only as good as the transmission of it. If you don't remember, what good does it do? So, our time-space coordinates in social time and space, in many ways, are from the dawn of humanity, or the dawn of human history, to roughly speaking, the so-called 17th century of the Common Era. So that would be around the 1600s. In other words, we go in framing question 1 from the dawn of recorded human memory, and a little bit before that, we start talking about Homo sapiens sapiens, the existence of the species in its current form on the planet, all the way to yesterday. Far too broad a time-space frame, but we had to get to now quickly. But we can't do it without addressing the dawn of human history forward, because we know that over half of recorded human history took place in Africa in terms of the formative period. And if we just talk about the species, well, that's an African story with a little bit of migration near the end up to now. So how did we do that? How did Africans preserve and affirm their ways of life? They did it for many centuries by passing on information and experiences through subsequent eras of migration, improvisation, and adaptation from antiquity to the present. What is the central theme in human history? Yes, migration. Migration is the central theme in human history. People move. They move before what we call antiquity. We're talking about antiquity here because what we call antiquity merely means what is the period of human history for which we have some material texts and practices, some stuff we can look at and say, oh, this is what they were doing. Everything before that, they were called prehistory in some ways, but we were doing stuff. It's just we're looking for material traces. So antiquity, human beings, Africans are creating, formalizing, diversifying, and developing societies. This is where you get the invention of the foundation for just about everything human beings are doing now. Did they invent the microphone? No. Did they think about science? Yes. So the template has been laid down. And then they figure out a way of preserving that knowledge and passing it on. The first way is mouth to ear. Don't touch your face. Mouth to ear. Don't touch your face. You see that lady from the CDC, y'all sent that video everywhere, right? She was saying, don't touch your face. Then she licked her fingers and turned the page. because you forget, right? But like Dr. Freddie told me yesterday, he assured me that you all not going to get it, probably because y'all are young, and then the NBA player got it and shut the NBA down. So again, even the scientists aren't sure. So be careful, don't touch your face. I just touched my face, but I got less time to be on the planet than y'all do. So do as I say and not as I do. Therefore, the point is that the first transmission was mouth to ear. Then they started writing stuff down. So the alphabet we use now has an African origin. It's not the Phoenician script, it's not the blend with the Greek and other, but if you go back to the Egyptian, to the hieroglyphs, you know, we teach hieroglyphs here, you learn for yourself, some of y'all already learned this, you can see the formative elements that contribute to what we now call, what the Greeks may say the alphabet, we call the alphabet, right? So they started writing it down. That brings us to the medieval period, the period between antiquity and now, the contemporary period. The medieval period, you got broader migration, diversification, and development. People walk out of Africa. People go other places. Some of them have already gone and create their own antiquities. We talk about Greece, we talk about Asia. Not Europe as much. Europe is kind of last to develop in the land. But by the time you get to medieval period, people now have adapted to where they're going to be. You know, as Professor Jackson, Father Jackson tells us, and you start talking about biological adaptation. And all human diversity is a combination of how long human beings have been on the planet, which is why the most diverse gene pool in the world is going to be Africa. The tallest people, the shortest people, fastest, slowest. I was watching Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about this the other day. If you want to find the blankest people in the world in terms of physical type, don't leave the African continent. The whitest people, the darkest people, the bluest eyes, the blackest eyes, the full genetic diversity is in Africa because those people have been here longer than everybody and are the parents of all the rest of us. So that's one type of diversity. Adaptation diversity. It snows up here, it's cold 8 months out the year, so you stay up there long enough, your skin's gonna lighten, so you get more sunlight, you get vitamin D deficiency otherwise. You know, your hair is gonna straighten quite, because when it rains, you can't have them curls catching that rain in your hair, you're gonna die of pneumonia. So all that stuff, this diversity like that, all that stuff is physical adaptation. The surface representation of humanity. But that's going to happen between antiquity and diversity, a little bit before antiquity, but now everybody is where they're going to be with the medieval period. And then in the contemporary period, people become aware of each other as the technologies improve. And of course, we know that then eventually leads to the enslavement of African people, among many other things in the world. I think I brought my man's in. Yeah. And of course, that's book we read before the midterm, one of the other books, including Wapiango, Something Torn and New, the two processes, dismemberment and rememberment. So dismemberment, the separation of Africans from Africa and the separation of African memory, not only from African people, but from world memory, and then the struggle over the last several centuries of African people to literally put that memory back together. Not just for Africans, but for the world. To contribute to the world, continue to contribute to the world, as Du Bois might say. So the third framing question, what are some of the similarities and differences in practices of self-determination of Africans in the U.S. and their counterparts throughout the hemisphere? This brought us up to the midterm. The time-space coordinates there, 16th, 17th centuries, in other words, the 1500s and 1600s, through the mid-19th century, through where we are for framing question 4. The answer, very quickly, African resistance. In other words, we don't like slavery, we're going to fight. Okay, it's being shaped to local, regional, and international elements of the modern world system social structures. Black people are going to resist wherever they are. Black women burning up stuff in New England, black women and men and children fighting in the Haitian Revolution, the Maroons of Jamaica, all things we talked about. And then you get a small group of black people who are learning how to read and write in the English language. We saw that in black movements in America. They're going to be writing petitions for freedom. Somebody told them, if you're a Christian, you're free, so they do what? Adopt Christianity, then they tell them, oh, well, not you, nigga, I'm sorry. And so then they say, okay, well, let's just fight y'all anyway then. And you see that black elite began to fight. Now, here's the thing, though. What is the key word in chapters 1 and 2 that mark the governance structure of Africans? Realizing the social structure is what we've been talking about. Who are Africans to other people here? But who they are to each other is a group that is determined to be self-determining. Self-determination, what's that M word that we talked about? Marks this whole self-regard. Maroonage, exactly right. So Maroons, Simones, or Seminoles as they were called in Florida, among other places. So Maroonage. So now we finally get to where we are, where we will be rudely interrupted by coronavirus, at least in person. It's going to get real interesting. I think maybe I'll do some of these videos on location. From the beach in Accra. Framing question 5. I'm not coming back. Anyway, how did Africans begin? Because apparently Africa, look at Africa, there's people not getting the coronavirus at the same rate. Y'all know we don't know. They make everybody wash their hands in Kenya. Did y'all see that? Before they get on the bus. In Nigeria, they got the thing set up. You got to do hand sanitizer and wash your hands before you go in the bank and stuff. Saying, see, that's what we need, some Africans over here. You get this guy out of the White House. Did you get out the paint? But if he get it, then, you know, anyway. I hope everybody stays healthy. Anyway, so, how did Africans begin to conceptualize unity in thought and action beyond national boundaries in the face of European and American imperialism? That's where we are going to be together on this in our last physical class before April. Framing question, conceptual category summary. Here we go. Here are our 6 conceptual categories. The social structure, who are Africans to other people at any moment in time and space. The governance structure category, who are they to each other in any moment in time and space. The ways of knowing category, how do they think about the world, themselves in the world, reality, themselves in reality. How do they create knowledge? How do they think about the nature of reality at any moment in time and space. Science and technology. What ways of interacting with the physical world do they either create, contribute to, or adapt to serve their needs in any moment in time and space? Movement and memory. As they go through time and space, how do they pass on their ideas about what they've experienced to future generations? And how do they think about past generations as they move through time and space? And then finally, cultural meaning making. What music, what art, what cultural texts and practices do they create in their time around the sun, in their moment in time and space, to mark that moment in time and space? These, again, are the conceptual categories that mark an Africana studies methodology and distinguish that methodology from other academic disciplines. And by asking each of these 6 conceptual questions for each of the framing questions, we then begin to develop an Africana studies approach. So the social structure for framing question 4, who are Africans to other people? Africans are existing, as is everybody else, in a European-oriented system of colonialism and imperialism. The Africans in the Western Hemisphere are speaking Spanish and French and Dutch and Portuguese. They are now have learned these colonial languages and had to adapt and make them their own, even though they have variations, because when you go to the governance structure, the local and increasingly international resistance by Africans and others, even though they're in these places in the Western Hemisphere, or if they're in Africa, they are being attacked. They are resisting. The Zulu as early as the 1820s and 30s. The Xhosas around the same time. The Ashantis in West Africa, or what is now Ghana, as late as the 1890s, 1900, 1910. These Africans are resisting the places what we call Nigeria, the Ethiopians who fight off everybody. The Ethiopians swear to you they was never colonized. So they fought off the Italians and so many others. So did the Somalis. Everybody's fighting. I'm using the names of nation states, even though they didn't use those names at that time, because they're not nation states. The social structure hadn't drawn those artificial lines yet or made them stick up. Meanwhile, the Africans in the United States are fighting in the War of 1812, the Civil War, fighting the Spanish-American War, fight ultimately in World Wars I and II. The Africans in the Caribbean are pulled into conflicts. In Central America, in Latin America, pulled into conflicts. But they are resisting. That's who they are to each other. They are forming resistance. In terms of ways of knowing, they develop narratives of pan-identity. In other words, people in the Western Hemisphere say, you call me black, okay, I'm going to be proud of being who I am. Ultimately, that will lead to the Black Power movement. It will lead to the notion of Africa as a good thing. And people in Africa don't see themselves as Africans yet, because Africa is a continent with many different people. But they, too, eventually began to see themselves as Africans. So in 2020, you say, ask somebody, where you from? Somebody say Africa. Okay, I know that, but where? West Africa. Okay, we have to play this game all the way through. Where? Okay, Ghana. Okay, are you Fa, are you Ganti, are you Ashanti? Oh, you know about Africa just enough to know that when you say Africa, you ain't saying nothing except one place. But for the people in the diaspora, They take Africa, we take Africa as a whole continent. Because being separated from it, that's the act of remembering that takes place in this ways of knowing. Literacy in settler colonial languages is now forming a second-order national language. What does that mean? You force me to learn English. You force me to learn Spanish and French. But there's still enough left of the African languages so that I made your language my language. Some people call that Creole, some people call that Pidgin English, some people call that Broken English, some people call it Ebonics. But those aren't slang. It isn't slang. It's Africans making those languages their own languages, what we might call national languages. In fact, the name Ebonics, coming from Dr. Robert Williams and some other folks in the early 1970s in St. Louis, a meeting of the Association of Black Psychologists, they said, why don't we come up with a name that allows Africans to conceptualize unity in thought and action beyond national boundaries? I'm saying it with the language of framing question 4, but I'm using that framing question to give another illustration. So they said, you speak French, you speak Spanish, you speak English, yeah, but everybody has this same meaning when you say, All these things mean the same thing, all those languages. It's tonal, because African languages are usually tonal. So what do they say? We got to come up with a way of connecting these languages that recognizes their differences in vocabulary, in phonology, in grammar, but that also recognizes the bonding element, the unity in thought. So they took one word, meaning black, ebony, and another word, which is a dimension of language, the herd dimension, phonics. They put together ebony phonics, and what's the word they get from it? Ebonics. Some people say, Ebonics means slang. Okay, you haven't studied. No. Ebonics is a word that the linguists and the psychologists put together that meant the language underneath the language, the thing that binds all the Africans, which is why if you're black and you speak one form of Ebonics, you can go other places in the African world and you might not speak the language they speak, but if you're watching, you're not just looking at the words they're saying, you're listening for the tone, you're looking for the hand gesture. The hand in the back mean the same thing all over. All believes it, you say. He said, how do you know that she don't believe him? Did you see the hand in the back? I did. Oh, you don't speak Ebonics. Let me translate that for you. These are not idle gestures. All this stuff is cultural texts and practices. So the ways of knowing how they're making unity, they're using these national forms of communication to facilitate the acquisition of social, economic, political power. This goes back to enslavement. If you read Julius Scott's book, The Common Wind, he talks about the fact that you would have Africans who were in slavery in the Caribbean, and Europeans would come around, and these Africans would slip into one of the languages they had created or had brought from Africa that they had blended, and the Europeans would complain. We saw these guys, and they were laughing at us. Why? They started talking in some Coromantee, whatever the language he used to call it, but we couldn't understand a word they're saying. And y'all ever been in a situation where people went into a language you didn't understand, talking right in front of you, and you knew they was talking about you? Yes, that happened all the time during slavery. What? Nothing, boss, nothing. Speak a language I understand. Yeah, okay. In other words, no. It's very interesting. Still happens, right? Science and technology. Frame question 4. How did Africans begin to conceive of unity in thought and action beyond national boundaries in the face of European and American imperialism? Industrial labor serves as a pull factor in African migration patterns. People are now leaving their place of birth to work other places. They're being pulled in by science and technology that is requiring a different type of labor. Marcus Garvey, for example, leaves Jamaica. He goes through Central America. He's in Panama. And he's looking at them, they're digging the Panama Canal. And he's saying, why everywhere I go, black people on the bottom? We got to do something about this. So he and Amy Ashwood Garvey and their friends, they start the Universal Negro Improvement Association. In part because Garvey is traveling now. He's on these ships. He's going looking other places. His father was a reader and a printer. So Garvey becomes very good at printing. That's why the UNIA's most effective tool of communication was not the phonograph, which was just being developed. It was the newspaper. Yes, ma'am. Yes, UNIA, Universal Negro Improvement. You always want to improve Negroes. Improvement Association. That's the first half. Then there's a dash. And then the A is for African. The C is for communities, one-on-one communities. The L is for league. So the full name of the UNIA is the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League. I should add a prepositional phrase, even though they usually don't. And African Communities League of the world. So not of Jamaica, not of New York, not of Mississippi, but of the world. So UNIA-ACL. There's still many chapters of UNIA all over the world. Here in DC, they have the Banneker Douglas Division, named Freddie Douglass and Benjamin Banneker. The UNIA is still. Many meetings they've had on this campus. Many times there's a whole lot of old school UNIA cats that come around a lot. You ever see, yes, ma'am? African Communities League of the world. So, in other words, connecting Africans wherever they find themselves. In fact, movement and memory, narratives of resistance began to align, blend, and commingle with narratives of settler national state formation. What does that mean? How do Africans pass on the memory of this moment as they conceptualize unity and thought and action? There's probably nobody in here who doesn't know the name Marcus Garvey. That's because African people have passed the name on of this Marcus Garvey through time and space. How do they remember the 19-teens, the 1920s, the 1930s, when they began to conceptualize unity? You take certain figures and you say, okay, Marcus Garvey, he represented all of us, so we're going to remember him. In fact, it was the Garveys that came up with a national, international symbol of black unity. It was in the form of what we call the UNIA flag. It was not a flag tied to any European flag that black people found themselves under, like the Stars and Stripes of the United States. It was not a flag tied to the Union Jack of the British. It was not a flag that was tied even to the blacks in former colonies who had developed their own flags, like Jamaica, Trinidad. It was a flag that they said, wherever you live in the world, if you're black, this is your flag. What were the colors of that flag? Red, black, and green. Red for the blood of our people and struggle, black for the color of the people, also the idea of unity, and green for prosperity in the future. That's what those colors mean. And here we are in 2020. You see a red, black, and green flag like the ones hanging out from the ubiquity tree up here in the upper quadrangle. You say to yourself, that's the black flag. Even as you look past that tree to the Caribbean tree, you see all the flags of the Caribbean nations. There was one who came from the Jamaican flag and then created that flag over there on that other tree. And we all know that whatever flag you're under, that flag, that red, black, and green flag, those colors, whether they be on tennis shoes or a tattoo, now represent all black people. That's movement and memory. Narratives of resistance begin to align, blend, and commingle with narratives of settler, national, or state formation. Because even as that flag represents all of us, you got other people who are identified with the places they were born and struggled in. This is the period of, Jackie Robinson was born in Cairo, Georgia during this period. Harriet Tubman died in 1913. They're identified with American history, but they're also created as national heroes. So if you go to University of Cape Town, South Africa, you go to UCT, and I take students on study abroad. You go through the tunnel going down the Rondebosch Road, and you pass by, and they got a mural with Garvey, Harriet Tubman. Who's Harriet Tubman? What's Marcus Garvey doing here in Cape Town, South Africa? How the Africans conceptualize unity in thought and action beyond national boundaries. You walk in this city, this campus, you see murals, you see pictures with Mandela or Miriam Makeba, you see Nina Simone on the wall in Accra, Ghana. Like, what are these people doing? You see Bob Marley everywhere. What is this Jamaican doing in England? What is he doing in Sao Paulo, Brazil? Or when I was in Salvador, Bahia? I'm like, what is Bob Marley? Bob Marley is universal now. Yes, because his music is so good. That too. Because he said he's going to run you crazy bald heads out of town. That's why he said Babylon is going to fall. This is Rastafarianism, and that's a great example. The Rastas, where did they come from? They took literally the name of the emperor of Ethiopia, Rastafari, Haile Selassie, and they made that the name of their faith tradition. Rastafari. What does that mean? That means Rastafari. That's his name. And when Haile Selassie came to Jamaica the first time, he got off the plane. It's an Ethiopian plane, so you know what they had on the side. They had the Ethiopian flag and also the lion, because that's the symbol, the Lion of Judah. And then these Negroes in Kingston, when the plane landed, they had a fence up. These rosters knocked the fence down, rushed the plane, and when he came out the runway, he's surrounded by thousands of rosters playing drums. He came out like you don't know, because they was like, Rastafari, the Lion of Judah. He's like, what? This is the guy we've been waiting for. He came from Ethiopia. He had never been to Jamaica. And what he realized in that moment, how did Africans conceptualize unity in thought and action beyond national boundaries in the face of European and American imperialism? They said, I don't care if you came from Ethiopia. Ethiopia shall stretch forth its hands unto God, and princes shall come out of Egypt. So we Ethiopians too. We are all Africans. That's movement and memory. Finally, cultural meaning making. The creation of music, dance, spoken and written texts that preserve and acknowledge the existence of specific maroon icons, shrines, rituals, and totems, locally and internationally. So at any moment, I'll give you one quick example following in the Bob Marley example. Italy gets his ass beat in 1896 by the Ethiopians. Very famous battle that you ask any Ethiopian about Adwa. You spell it A-D-W-A, A-D-O-W-A, but Adwa, the Battle of Adwa. The Ethiopians come together, even if they had beef with each other. They all came together and they defeated the Italians under the emperor at the time was Menelik II. Menelik II. The news of Italy defeating Ethiopia went all over the world. Ethiopia defeating Italy went all over the world. In New York, they celebrated. In the Caribbean, they celebrated. Ethiopia beat the Italians. You're not going to colonize Ethiopia. The Ethiopians then take the resentment of getting their ass beat back to Italy. And for 2 generations, they seethe. And finally, in the 1930s, they come back for the rematch. And they got planes now. Some of the planes were blessed by the Pope in Vatican City before they take off to go bomb the Ethiopians. They're going to use mustard gas. It's the nasty stuff they developed in World War I. You spray that stuff on people, they breathe it, they die. They're going to just gas the Ethiopians. They're going to bomb the Ethiopians. The Ethiopians ain't got no plane. The Ethiopian Air Force, how the Africans conceptualize unity and thought and action beyond national boundaries. The Ethiopian Air Force was set up by an African-American pilot who had flown in World War I. But they didn't have an Air Force by that time. They got horses. They got ground game. They got some rifles. They had no planes. So here come Italy to bomb Ethiopia. The Italo-Ethiopian War of 1934-35. By now there's a League of Nations in place. Haile Selassie is the emperor. Haile Selassie travels to the League of Nations in Geneva. He gives a famous speech. Ethiopia on the verge of being invaded again. The African world looking like, what the hell? The Europeans is like, oh yeah, we're not going to have any more wars. And Haile Selassie, that's some bullshit. Y'all about to let them attack us? Haile Selassie then gives a famous speech. Part of the speech he says, until the philosophy that holds one race inferior and another superior is finally and permanently abandoned, everywhere is war. Haile Selassie gives this speech. Fast forward 2 generations. Robert Nesta Marley records a song using the words of Haile Selassie's speech. Until the philosophy which holds one race superior and another, and his wife and him in the back, the high threes, inferior is finally and permanently abandoned and discredited and abandoned. Everywhere is war. And you hear the one in the back, war is a war. What are you doing, man? I took Haile Selassie's speech from before I was born and made it into a song. And people know that song, but they don't know that it was unity in thought beyond national boundaries that connected those Ethiopians to those Jamaicans to Pan-Africanism. All. Pan mean all Africans. Yes, ma'am.
How do you spell his name?
Selassie. S-E-L-A-S-S-I-E. First name Haile. H-A-I-L-E. Haile Selassie. Rastafari. The emperor of Ethiopia. Not without his own problems. If you want to get into a fight, get 2 Ethiopians together and ask about Haile Selassie, and then step back. Because there is no such thing as a perfect person. That's why we talk about icons. Icons are figures of uncritical praise. United States, every country has icons. Black people have icons too. Marley is an icon. Nina Simone is an icon. Miriam Makeba, the South African singer, is an icon. Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana. Nnamdi Azikiwe of Nigeria, first prime ministers of their two countries, are icons. Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya, icon. Gamal Nasser of Egypt, icon. Are they without problems? No. People say, well, Castro's a dictator. Yeah, you got me around here thinking George Washington is my father. Which of those is more problematic? I'm going to go with George Washington. Y'all see this recent report? They said George Washington had wooden teeth, but then they found out what the teeth were really made of. Enslaved Africans, so they took the teeth and made teeth for him out of the mouths of the enslaved Africans at Mount Vernon. Yeah, you're not my father. Well, if you are, I'm about to try to do a little patricide. Enjoy your little life. All right, the social structure. Let me pause here, because we can go back through these categories again, but rather than do that, given the fact that in the old gospel song they say, "This may be the last time, may be the last time." I don't know. Let's go frame question 1821 in the United States. We talked about these maps earlier, but I'm going to show y'all these maps very quickly. You see what's happening by 1821. You got red means slave states, where slavery is technically legal. Blue means free states, meaning slavery is illegal, but they might snatch you behind into slavery. Slave territories, they are not yet states, but they're going to try to organize them. Free territories, they really don't care here because Native Americans are up here, so they call it unorganized territory. That's the social structure, because this place is teeming with millions of Native Americans. Other countries, okay, yeah. Other countries should mean all the Native Americans here, but they're going to claim New Spain, okay, Mexico, whatever. The point is that you got a line, and they say you can't come in. Above this line, you come in free. Below this line, you come in slavery. Here's the problem. You had these states already. But what's this? Slave state, right? Missouri. That's the Nat Turner Rebellion, 1831, Southampton, Virginia. They terrified these rebellions. African Maroons gonna fight you. By 1837, then 20 years later, they're coming across Missouri Compromise. Yeah. Arkansas has been developed, the Republic of Texas. These white supremacists go down here and dispossess Mexico. Mexico's still talking about this. This is still, look at that, that's still Mexico, 1837. 1846, the feds done bailed out these white supremacists. This is Texas now. The Wilcox Proviso, 1846, and that was James Knox Polk, president from Knoxville. Well, not from Knoxville, but Knoxville named the Knox family. Proposed that slavery be prohibited from territory conquered from Mexico. Why? Because Mexico abandoned enslavement. In fact, they outlawed it. In fact, Cinco de Mayo, when people go around and get drunk, that holiday came in part from Mexico declaring their victory on a battle they had over France, and they also tied it to the Emancipation Proclamation. So when Cinco de Mayo comes and people get drunk, take a second and remember that that's also a holiday that the Mexicans celebrated the fact that they did not have slavery. They didn't want to have slavery in Mexico. All right. It's almost good. Oh, there go Dred and Harriet Scott and their daughters. Dred Scott, Harriet Scott lived in what is now Minnesota. They came into St. Louis. They said, we was in a free territory. We should be free down here. Supreme Court said, yeah, good luck with that. You ain't got no rights. Black people don't have any rights. If we take you free, you're free. If we take you a slave, you're a slave. They're buried about 10 minutes from where Mike Brown's body lay in the sun a few Augusts ago. Ferguson, Missouri. When you St. Louis, no, Ferguson is a suburb of saying Ferguson, Missouri, that's saying Silver Spring. And Dred, Harriet, and Scott are buried about 10 minutes from there because the Supreme Court said they didn't have any rights. That any white person was bound to respect. It created a notion of blackness that transcended. Abraham Lincoln once said of this white woman right here, social structure. Harriet Beecher Stowe, who wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, said, you are the little lady that started the big war, because she wrote a whole novel that basically tried to say that slavery was bad. And of course, black people didn't need to read that. Why? because we experienced it, we kind of know it's bad. So in the social structure, she's given a lot of credit, but here's where it comes in, the problem. Governance structure. My man Josiah Henson. Josiah Henson was the brother whose story she stole and remixed and wrote. He is the guy she based Uncle Tom on. But the problem is, this is a new book about him, Jared Brock wrote. When some people didn't know this story, read this book, was like, this is great. But those of us who knew the story was like, okay, dude, you know, wrote a story that everybody already knew, but yeah, I guess you're gonna get paid too. So anyway, Martin Delaney, who was Josiah Henson's friend, wrote to Frederick Douglass, who was also his friend, and said, Mr. Douglass, since Harriet Beecher Stowe is your friend, any of y'all have to read Uncle Tom's Cabin? Yeah, exactly. So y'all have to read her too. In about 2 minutes, we're gonna talk about something else. I got time. 23? Oh yeah, I got a couple of minutes. So, Martin Delaney writes Frederick Douglass and says, yeah, since your friend making all this money off the man's story, you know where he is, right? Josiah Henson escaped slavery. He's in Canada. He can't even live with his family, rest of his family and stuff. He had to get the hell out of the United States. You think Harriet Beecher Stowe could cut that check? Could she give Josiah Henson some money since she stole the story? Very interesting correspondence between Martin Delaney and Frederick Douglass. In fact, this is my man, Martin Delaney. Martin Delaney was like Uncle Tom's Cabin. That's cute. It's very nice. By show of hands, which of you Negroes had a nice cabin on your plantation? Where did you live? Oh. So in a black newspaper, Science and Technology, how they use technology, Martin Robeson Delaney begins writing his own novel, chapter by chapter. And issue after issue of the magazine, it comes out, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 59, chapter 62, of what? Blake, or the Huts of America. A Tale of the Mississippi Valley, the Southern United States and Cuba, M.R. Delaney. Framing question 4, how did Africans begin to conceptualize unity and thought beyond national boundaries in the face of European and American imperialism? Martin Delaney says, I'm gonna write a black story. It tells you the real story of how this thing went down. And it's not gonna just be the United States. I'm going to Africa, I'm writing about the Caribbean, I'm going to Cuba. Martin Delaney's like, Uncle Tom's Cabin, whatever, Blake, or the Huts of America. This is the man himself, Martin Robeson Delaney. Martin Delaney, friends with Frederick Douglass, this is his man's. This is Robert Campbell. Robert Campbell's from Jamaica. Robert Campbell and Martin Delaney is like, look, this slavery is some bullshit. We ain't never gonna get no equality. Hey, look, man, I was born in West Virginia. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and you know, slavery is not going. We gonna have to. Robert Campbell, yeah, man, I was born in Jamaica. It's the same thing. So what do? 1859, they get on 2 boats and go to Africa. They end up in Ghana. No, not Ghana. They end up in what is now Nigeria. And they start talking to the Nigerians and they say, look, if we can get over here, we know how to grow cotton and stuff, sugar cane. We can grow this stuff in Africa and build Africa and smash this whole system. And what do they say? Some of you Nigerians know a place called Abeokuta. They meet with the ruler of Abeokuta, and the ruler of Abeokuta said, yeah, we can do that. And they say, sign a treaty, but then the Civil War jumps out. Martin Delaney comes back to the United States and said, hold on, I'll be back. Joins the United States Army, becomes the first commissioned major in the United States history. So if you look at the social structure, if you see the name Martin Delaney, they're going to say, he was the first black to serve in the Army as a major. But if you look at the governance structure, no, this was a man who was trying to free black people. He didn't give a damn where it came from. And he got some of his people from the Caribbean, and they wrote a book called Search for a Place that talks about that. My man, Kabir, just passed away. This is us 2 years ago. Some of our people. It's my man, Larry Crow, one of the finest African-American historians of his time. Brother David and Sister here. This is me. And this is Daniel Alexander Payne from Wilberforce College. But this brother, Kabir, he used to portray Martin Delaney every year. We're standing about 15 minutes from the grave of Martin Delaney. This is the grave of Martin Delaney, a big-ass piece of black in the middle of the cemetery in Wilberforce, Ohio. His wife is buried there, Catherine, and they named all their children African names. They had a daughter named Cleopatra, a son named Ramses. They had another son named Toussaint Louverture. They all buried in this graveyard in Ohio, We go out there every Memorial Day, every other Memorial Day. Hopefully the virus won't prevent us from going at the end of May. May the 30th, we'll be back out there. Because we talk about what Martin Delany meant. And this is his novel. They put the thing together. So if you read Uncle Tom's Cabin and didn't read Blake, go whoever gave you Uncle Tom's Cabin and said you committed an intellectual crime. This is the book you should read before you ever read Uncle Tom's Cabin. This is the book Martin Delany said, I'm not reading no more books on white people writing about black people. I'm gonna write my own damn book, and it's like a historical novel. It's really something. And some of y'all filmmakers need to make Blake into a movie. One day they're gonna make Blake. Don't be no Cooper filmmaker. We don't need no comedy. So then don't let no comedians play Blake. All right, so by 1858, you see the United States is continuing going slavery. You know what? Pause. Because so many people came in after this, and it's almost time, I realize, but for those of you who were at the beginning, here from the beginning, forgive me, for those of you who came in after that, here's the playbook, because this may be the last time we're together physically, at least it will be to the 6th. The virtual class rules are as follows. The outside plan. We're going to use either Zoom or Integrity. I'm thinking Zoom. Instructions are forthcoming. Uploaded lectures and office hours will have there. Embody format, going to be a different form of embody. I'm going to ask y'all questions that I want you to answer. And there will be at least enough to get you to 20, probably more. You'll answer questions based on your books, so make sure you got your books. Whatever I write to send to you, and uploaded lectures. Going to record some lectures and have live office hours. The bi-weekly essays are due as usual. The 4th framing question is due a week from this Friday. 2 weeks from this Friday, spring break. 11:59. The 5th framing question due Friday, April 17th. We'll be back by then. Check the emails for updates and class lecture essays, draft text. That's it. All right. So I'll see y'all shortly. Everybody be safe. If you're staying on campus, they got a system to feed y'all and everything. If you can help it, don't leave the country. You got a place to stay, Howard. We're going to keep the doors open. We don't want no beef from this white nationalist in the White House.